Hey guys, this week for this video, I wanted to go over essentially how I'm benching 4 times a week, why I'm doing it, and sort of like how to progress bench press volume from like say 2 times a week to 3 times a week to 4 times a week. So first off, this is just basically like an overall layout of sort of like how my bench press training is structured. So on day one, I have a 5 by 6, like this is like basically like a peak week intensity, like a week four for me is I do 4 week waves up and then I basically come back down into a week one cycle continues. But for example, I have a 5 by 6 at 7 on Larson press. Day two is a 1 by 2 at 9 with a 3 by 8 for down sets at 7, and then comp bench on day three ascending sets to RP6. So say that's like I start like 265, and then after those ascending sets, I end up at like say 290 on that fourth set to hit RPE6, and then on day four it's a cold script bench press at an RPE8. So basically, 4 times a week bench pressing is not something that you should just go to straight immediately. In general, when I'm starting off most power lifters, I'm going to keep them at about a 2 times a week bench press free frequency. And the reason for that is because your volume tolerance is quite low, and basically you want to progress with about like you don't want to like just go straight to like 3 times a week if you can make good progress on 2 times a week. For example, I tend to keep people at about 2 times a week, if they have about 8 to 10 weekly sets. As we are needing to be more closer to that 10 set, and we start to like need a need for more increased practice, more volume on the actual movement, then I'll go to about 3 times a week, and generally we'll keep there for most lifters. With about 10 to 15 sets of direct bench press work per week. That's not counting accessory. That's just like direct specific bench press work. Bench press tends to need a little bit more specific volume practice because it's the most technical of, in my opinion, of all of the three power lifts. They just, and also just the upper body muscles. They recover faster. They have a bit higher, faster technique to decay because they are smaller muscles, do not take as much damage. So that's essentially why I would do that with more, a little bit more volume on bench press. Now, 3 times a week is generally going to be best for most power lifters. I do find most people they do best with most 10 to 15 sets of direct bench press per work per week. I also don't like exceeding about 5 working sets per day of bench press volume. I'm really just like any exercise because I find that that's like really when like the quality of work goes really down. You're kind of just mostly fatiguing yourself. There's really like not as good of a stimulus to fatigue ratio with that. And in general, like form might start to break down a little bit more, maybe a higher risk of injury because of that, because you're just exposing yourself to a movement pattern that you're really not used to. So that's why you generally want to do that. Now, one thing I will say about 4 times a week bench press in free frequency, in order to do this, you have to be really, really good at auto-regulating your RPE and intensities and being very accurate and honest with yourself on that day. Essentially, you're not going to be strong every single day that you're bench pressing. Same thing with like really any sort of lift. And basically any sort of powerlifting program, we are trying to have basically one day a week be really strong for peak strength, and then the other days are more about base building, and your max is going to be fluctuating, a little bit day to day. And so on these other days, say for example, day two is my primary day with my day four, and then with my 4 times a week frequency, just like this is. And now, obviously, I'm still going to try to be as accurate with my RPE as possible. Say if I have a really high output on one of these other days, I'm still going to adhere to that RPE, but you cannot break that RPE because if you do that, then you're going to like run into some issues with fatigue management. Maybe you have maybe you're constantly sore, stuff like that. So you have to be really, really good at with RPE, and it also applies to 3 times a week, but even more so with 4 times a week bench. That's what I would say there. And also, it's like if you're going to a higher frequency approach, 3 to 4 times. In general, I like having a little bit more variation in exercise selection and loading schemes. For example, I have a lot of different variations in loading on here. A lot of this is like straight sets on bench press because I do find that bench press does respond a little bit better to a higher average intensity. And then like the other day though, I have a ascending sets where you basically I already explained that to help have that variation in loading. And also, just a little bit more exercise, maybe for example, for some lifters, I might have, 2 comp bench days, and then I have 2 variation days. That's typically how I would do things. Same with like, actual three times a week, typically, around two comp bench days and then maybe one variation day. I come from an athletic training background, it's like rehabilitation, and so in general, it's like more variation tends to be a little bit better for like longevity and not like stressing movement patterns to like the same extent all the time. Having that variation loading can also have some more novelty and being a little bit like more okay with like auto regulating things and whatnot. Um, Now, if you are going to be basically increasing volume, you're going from say two times a week to 3 times a week. You're not starting to notice, okay, I'm getting around, that 10 sets a week thing might be a good idea to start doing, 3 times a week. I recommend not increasing volume from that point. Just basically keep your like 10 sets per week. And as you need to make very small weekly set additions, so 10 to 20 sets increase at most. For example, this is my old layout, my last block before we went to 4 times a week, and I tally up the weekly volume. It's basically a 20% increase in volume. So basically 1 to 2 sets at a time increasing, basically because we want to be able to still adapt to our training. We don't want to just like be recovering all the time. Recovery, like basically with SRA curves, you stimulate the muscle or the movement pattern. Then you have to recover, and then you adapt. And once you are adapted, that's when we want to stimulate again. Um, so that's why you don't want to just increase all at once because you will overcome your body's adaptive capacities. Um, and they're also, just to be completely like honest with you, when you are increasing from say 2 times a week to 3 times a week, there might be a little bit of a lag in seeing that performance increase because your body is getting more used to that higher frequency. Again, be okay with auto regulating, and eventually you're going to be able to have more strength, be a little more consistent. Same thing goes with, for example, 4 times a week. There's going to be a little bit of a lag time there. You might be a little bit more sore. You might be a little bit more, less recovery. Your basically your fatigue patterns might not be as consistent. Like in general, it's a lot easier to like, for example, like peak out a certain strength on a certain day, especially like in a competition setting with lower frequency. Like 2 times a week is super easy to peak. 1 time a week is obviously easier. And then we should go like the 3 to 4 times a week. It tends to become a little bit harder to control those fatigue patterns. But we do that by basically auto-regulating and manipulating intensity and schemes essentially during the week and volume on certain days to make sure that we're strongest on the days when we need to be. So I'm going to show you guys in the next little clip a little bit of a example of like my weekly bench press training. If you guys have any, and so you guys can just kind of say how I go about this in practice. All right, guys. So this is a sample week of training. So first off, this is going to be basically my 6 day. I did 265 with like RPE like 7 on this day. So you can see here. I do that. That's day one, and then the day right after. This is my primary bench day. I feel really strong for some reason. The day after, right after I do that with Larson press, helps me feel really good. This is a 336 for 2 at RPE 8, and then I did some down sets for 8 reps with 265, and then I bumped it up to 275 on the last set because I was a little bit stronger than I expected. Again, this is me like auto-regulating things to hit that target RPE, which for this week was RPE 7 on my down sets, and that was not the case on my down sets. But again, like for some reason, I'm just really strong after I do my 5x6 with Larson press. It helps with my technique a lot. This Larson press, I find tends to just really be beneficial for people with a little bit of a longer range of motion, with that scapular control, depressing the scapula, chest up, neck into the back of the bench press, um, and overall just getting a little bit of that hip extension with basically having the knees a little bit lower than the hips. Um, so that was what I did for my 3x8 on my down sets. This was ascending sets of 5. This is like a week 1 day. I did 2 counts on this day to RPE 5. And then this is going to be my third bench day of my 3x8. Sorry, my fourth for my 3x8. Did like 248 and went up to like 259. So that's sort of like a sample of like what a week of 4 times a week bench press training will look in terms of like loading and how I sort of auto-regulate things in my own training. So yeah, essentially like that's kind of how it works.